I kept telling myself it didn't matter. That being 30 and untouched wasn't a big deal. I wore it like a badge sometimes, pretending it was a choice. Pretending I was above the desperate chasing, the awkward hookups, the drama. But the truth is, it wasn't a choice. It was fear. It was years of shutting down whenever someone got too close. Years of flinching when a hand lingered too long or a look held too much. Years of wanting to be wanted, but not knowing what to do if someone actually did. And so I waited. And waited. Until waiting became normal. Until loneliness didn't feel like loneliness anymore. It just felt like life. My friends joked about it. They thought I was just picky. "You're a unicorn," they'd say, grinning. "Still untouched in your 30s? That's hot." I'd laugh with them, play along, but I'd catch the look sometimes, curious, pitying, confused. Like they were trying to figure out what was wrong with me. I couldn't blame them. I asked myself the same thing every night. I tried to keep busy, keep moving. Work, errands, gym, repeat. It helped me ignore the silence. But every now and then, it hit, like a punch in the gut. At weddings. At bars. At night, when the bed felt too cold and too big. That's when the truth crept in. I was alone. And worse, I didn't know how to stop being alone. That night started like any other. I wasn't planning on doing anything. I was scrolling mindlessly, just killing time. But something in me was tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of watching life happen to everyone else while I stood still. So I opened the app. The one I downloaded 6 months ago but never used. I didn't even set it up properly. My profile was half finished, no picture, just a vague line about being curious. I figured no one would message me anyway. I was wrong. His message came 5 minutes later. "Late night thinker?" That's all it said. I stared at it, heart thudding, like it was some kind of trap. But I replied. I don't know why. Maybe because the way he wrote felt different. Simple. Honest. Not sleazy or rushed. He didn't ask what I looked like. He didn't ask what I was into. He asked how my day was. Asked what I do when I can't sleep. It was weird, but in a good way. Like he was tuning into a part of me I usually hide. His name was Arden. Older than me by about 12 years. His picture showed salt and pepper hair, a dark beard, and these eyes that didn't smile, even when his mouth did. There was something calm about him. Something controlled. He wasn't trying too hard. He didn't have to. We talked for hours. About nothing. About everything. He told me he was a chef, used to work in fine dining but left it behind for private gigs. I told him I was a graphic designer, mostly freelance, mostly bored. He said he liked people who think too much. Said they always taste better. I laughed at that, even though I didn't know if it was supposed to be a joke. Around 4 a.m. he said, "You want to meet sometime?" My stomach dropped. I hesitated, typing, deleting, typing again. Finally I sent, "I don't usually do this." His reply came fast. "That's why I asked you." There was a pause in the chat. Long enough for my anxiety to start screaming. But then he added, "You don't have to decide now. But if you ever stop waiting, you know where to find me." And with that, he logged off. I didn't sleep after that. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering what the hell just happened. Wondering why my hands were shaking. I hadn't even touched him, hadn't seen him in person, and already something inside me felt opened. Exposed. Like he'd reached through the screen and found a part of me no one else had bothered to look for. I wanted to run. But more than that, I wanted to know what came next. I wanted to feel what it would be like to stop being afraid. I didn't know it yet, but that night was the beginning of everything. The first crack in the shell I'd built around myself. The first spark in a fire I wouldn't know how to control. And part of me already knew. Arden wasn't going to be safe. He was going to be the thing that finally broke me open. I waited 3 days before I messaged him again. I told myself I was too busy, that I needed to think it through, that I shouldn't act desperate. But the truth was simpler. I was scared. Not scared of him, exactly, but of what saying yes would mean. What if he saw me and changed his mind? What if I froze or panicked or said something stupid? What if I wasn't enough? Still, on the third night, after staring at our last messages for an hour, I typed, "I've stopped waiting." He replied almost instantly, "Good. Tomorrow at 7. My place. I'll cook." No emoji. No nervous energy. Just fact, like he already knew I'd come around. I don't know what I expected, but it wasn't that. I sat there staring at his reply, heart pounding, hands sweaty. I told myself not to read into it. He was older, maybe more straightforward. Maybe I was just out of practice. Hell, maybe I never had practice. But there was something about the way he spoke, something that made it feel like I'd already agreed before I said a word. I barely slept that night. My mind spun in 1,000 directions. What do I wear? Do I shave? Do I bring something? Should I Google what people do before their first time? I hated how ridiculous I felt. Like I was back in high school preparing for a date that might not even happen. But this wasn't high school. This was real. This was the moment I'd been avoiding for a decade. The next day, I was useless. Couldn't work. Couldn't focus. My stomach twisted every time I looked at the clock. At 6:30, I got in my car. At 6:45, I parked in front of his building. I sat there for a full 10 minutes, breathing too fast and trying not to throw up. When I finally walked up to his door and rang the bell, my fingers were trembling. He opened the door like he'd been waiting behind it. No smile. Just calm eyes and that low, steady voice. "You made it." I nodded, stepped inside. The place smelled like rosemary and garlic. The lights were low, soft jazz playing in the background. Everything felt expensive without trying. He handed me a glass of water before I could ask. "Drink," he said, like it was an order, but not unkind. I did. He guided me to the couch. No rush. No obvious moves. Just presence. That was the word. Arden was present. He didn't fidget. Didn't talk too much. He sat next to me, just close enough that I could feel his heat, and asked, "How was your day?" I stammered through some answer I don't even remember. My mind was screaming. Every second that passed made me more aware of my body. My posture, my hands, the sweat at the back of my neck. He seemed to notice. "You're nervous," he said. Not a question. Just a fact. I nodded, embarrassed. "I don't do this," I said. "Ever." He looked at me for a long second, then said, "I know. That's why I'm not touching you." That caught me off guard. I don't know what I expected. Aggression, hunger, maybe something wild. But he wasn't trying to seduce me. He was studying me, watching the panic build behind my eyes. And instead of pushing forward, he leaned back. "Relax," he said softly. "You're safe. We're just talking." And somehow, those words hit harder than a kiss. Safe. It had been so long since I felt that. I didn't realize how tightly I was holding myself until I started to unwind. We talked more. Nothing heavy. Favorite foods, worst dates, dumb childhood fears. His voice was steady, a kind of anchor. And the way he looked at me, like I was the only thing that existed in the room. It didn't feel like seduction. It felt like recognition. An hour passed. Maybe two. I lost track of time. At one point, he reached over and touched my shoulder. Just that. A warm, slow hand resting on the fabric of my shirt. I swear I stopped breathing. His hand didn't move. He didn't even look at it. He just kept talking, like it was the most natural thing in the world. But I felt it like fire. Like electricity under my skin. I wanted to lean in. I wanted to run. I wanted to do everything and nothing all at once. But I stayed still. He noticed. Of course he did. "That's enough for tonight," he said, his voice almost gentle. "You're full." I didn't understand what he meant. Full of what? Anxiety? Longing? Fear? Maybe all of it. He stood up, walked me to the door without asking if I wanted to stay. "Next time," he said. Just that. When I got home, I sat on my bed for a long time. My clothes still smelled like his place, like spice and smoke and something deeper. I hadn't even kissed him, and yet I felt like I'd been unraveled. Like he'd touched something inside me I didn't know was exposed. I stared at my phone for an hour, wondering if he'd message. He didn't. I went to sleep feeling like something had changed. And the worst part? I didn't know if I wanted it back. The days after our second meeting felt like a fog I couldn't step out of. I was walking through my routine like a sleepwalker, present in body but lost in my head. Arden didn't message me, and I didn't message him. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know what to say. Everything felt too small. Hi felt meaningless. "When can I see you again?" felt desperate. I kept opening our chat, staring at that last message, "next time," and wondering if he meant it. I told myself to focus on other things, to throw myself back into work, catch up with friends, clean the apartment, anything to keep from falling into that pit again. But nothing helped. Every spare second, my mind went back to him. To his hand on my shoulder. To the quiet way he looked at me, like he was already inside my head. I couldn't stop reliving that night, over and over, until I didn't know if I missed a man or the feeling he gave me. 3 days later he messaged. One word. "Tonight?" My fingers were already moving before my brain could catch up. "Yes." He sent the address again, as if I didn't already have it memorized. No smiley faces. No explanations. Just that silent confidence that made my skin crawl and thrill at the same time. I spent the next 4 hours trying to convince myself I was ready. But I wasn't. Not really. I was scared. But the difference was, I didn't care. I wanted him too much to care. I wanted to stop thinking. I wanted to be held down, touched, changed. I wanted to forget who I was before I met him. This time when I arrived, the door was already open. He was standing there like he'd been waiting again. But this time, there was something different in his eyes. Sharper. Hungrier. He stepped aside and let me in without a word. The lights were lower than before. The music was slower. Something inside me tensed as I crossed the threshold, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. I followed him into the living room, heart pounding. He turned to face me, and for a long second, he just stared. Then he said, "You're here because you want to be." It wasn't a question. I nodded anyway. He walked toward me slowly, then stopped just inches away. "No talking," he whispered. His hands moved first. Not rushed, not gentle. Deliberate. He undressed me like he was peeling something fragile, something sacred. I flinched once, and he paused. "You say stop, we stop," he said, eyes locked on mine. I'm not here to hurt you. And yet I knew deep down he already had. Not with his touch, but with his presence. He had already cracked something open in me. He led me to the bedroom, and everything after that was a blur of sensation. I'd imagined this moment so many times in my life. Awkward, clumsy, maybe even disappointing. But this wasn't like that. It was intense, raw, consuming. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't soft. It felt like being torn apart and stitched back together all at once. There were moments I gasped, moments I trembled, moments I froze, but I never said stop. I didn't want to. When it was over, I lay there on his sheets, body shaking, eyes unfocused. I wasn't crying, not exactly, but there were tears on my face. He didn't say anything. He didn't cuddle or coo or ask how I felt. He sat beside me, lit a cigarette, and said quietly, "Now you're real." I didn't know what he meant. I still don't. But those words stayed with me, carved into the back of my skull. I got dressed slowly, my limbs feeling foreign, like I was walking in a stranger's skin. He walked me to the door again, same as before, no kiss, no goodbye. Just a final glance that made me shiver. When the door shut behind me, I stood in the hallway for what felt like forever, trying to catch my breath. On the way home, I kept touching my chest like I was checking if my heart was still there. Everything felt too loud. My thoughts were screaming, my body was buzzing, and I couldn't tell if I felt alive or shattered. That night I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling, wondering what the hell I had just let happen. And yet, under all the confusion and shame and rawness, I felt something else. Hunger. Not for sex. Not even for Arden. For more. For whatever it was that I touched when I was with him. For the version of myself that didn't overthink, that didn't hesitate. That version terrified me. But I wanted to know him again. Even if it meant losing pieces of myself along the way. I became addicted to the way he made me feel. Not just physically, though God, that was part of it, but the way he looked at me like I was both a puzzle and a prize. The way he barely said anything but somehow said everything I needed to hear. I kept telling myself it wasn't love. That it was just chemistry. Curiosity. Obsession, maybe? But even that word didn't feel strong enough. I woke up thinking about him. I went to bed replaying every detail of the night we spent together. I started checking my phone every 5 minutes, scrolling through our messages, waiting for his name to pop up. Sometimes it did. Sometimes it didn't. He wasn't consistent. That should have been the first red flag. But I didn't care. I told myself that when he went silent, it was because he was busy. He had a life. He was older. Mature. He didn't need to text constantly. I was the one who needed too much. That's what I told myself to stay sane, but I wasn't sane. Not anymore. I was unraveling piece by piece. I stopped going out. Ignored calls from friends. Skipped work deadlines. My world was shrinking down to a single point, and that point was him. Arden. The only thing that made me feel anything real. I tried to distract myself. Tried hooking up with someone else just to prove I could. But I couldn't go through with it. I pulled away halfway through, my chest tight, skin crawling. All I could think about was how it didn't feel the same. It didn't feel like him. And without that feeling, what was the point? I started texting Arden more. Too much. Messages that said nothing but begged everything. Hey. Thinking of you. Hope your day's okay. No reply. Hours passed. Days. Then out of nowhere, he'd respond. Always short. Always cool. Busy. Soon. And that was enough to reel me back in. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove to his place without asking. I didn't even text first. My hands were shaking the whole time, but I didn't stop. I rang his buzzer and waited, heart pounding. When he opened the door, he looked surprised. Not angry. Not happy. Just mildly amused. Like a professor watching a student fail a test he warned them about. "Didn't expect you," he said. I pushed past him, couldn't even look at him. My voice was already cracking when I said, "Why are you doing this to me?" He tilted his head, arms folded, eyes cold. "Doing what?" I exploded. Words tumbled out, messy, emotional, unfiltered. I told him I couldn't stop thinking about him, that I felt like I was losing myself, that I didn't understand what we were. His face stayed neutral the whole time, like he was watching a performance he'd already seen. When I finally stopped talking, out of breath and blinking back tears, he said, "I never promised you anything. It wasn't cruel. It was honest." Maybe that was worse, that I felt small. So small. I backed toward the door, embarrassed, humiliated. But he stopped me. Stepped forward and gently touched my chin. "You weren't nothing before me," he said. "You just didn't know who you were yet." I wanted to scream. Instead, I whispered, "Then who am I now?" He smiled. Not kindly. "Someone who's still figuring it out." I left before I cried. When I got back in my car, I slammed the doors shut and screamed into the steering wheel. My phone buzzed a few minutes later. A notification from the same app we met on. Arden was online. Not just online, active. Flirting with someone else. I stared at the screen, heart sinking into my stomach. The profile he was talking to was younger, hotter, more confident. I watched the conversation unfold, and something in me cracked open. I realized then, he wasn't mine. He never was. I had just convinced myself he was because he let me. I threw my phone onto the passenger seat and sat there in silence, hollowed out. That night I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I lay on the floor of my apartment, staring at the ceiling, asking the question I'd avoided for weeks. What the hell am I doing to myself? But I already knew the answer. I was chasing someone who didn't want to be caught. And I wasn't in love. I was possessed. By a fantasy. By a man who never gave me anything but still took everything I had to give. And the worst part? I knew I'd still answer the next time he called. I started to lose myself in ways I didn't even notice at first. It was little things, like forgetting to reply to messages, skipping meals, leaving the dishes to pile up. Then it got worse. I stopped answering calls from my mom, stopped showing up for work meetings, started drinking late into the night just to dull the noise in my head. I couldn't escape him. Arden wasn't there, but he was everywhere. His voice, his scent, his touch, it lingered like a bruise I couldn't heal. I tried to talk to someone, to explain it, but the words wouldn't come out right. I didn't want to sound crazy. I didn't want anyone to tell me it was just a phase or that I'd get over it. Because deep down, I didn't want to get over it. I wanted to feel it fully, even if it destroyed me. I went out one night, hoping to lose myself in someone else's arms. I met a guy at a bar, sweet, charming, funny. He leaned in close when he talked, smiled like he meant it. I told myself this was it. This was the moment I finally moved on. But when he kissed me, something inside me recoiled. My body didn't respond. My skin felt numb. I kept seeing Arden's face, hearing his voice, feeling his hands. I pulled away, mumbled an excuse, and left before things got further. I felt sick. Not because of the guy. Because of me. Because I realized I didn't want anyone else. Not really. Arden had carved himself into me so deeply that everything else felt fake that I started sending messages again. Too many. Rambling ones. Late night ones. Ones I immediately regretted but didn't delete. Most of them went unanswered. But one night, around 3 a.m., he finally replied. "Don't become a shadow." That was it. Just that one line. I read it over and over until it didn't even feel like English anymore. Was that a warning? A threat? A goodbye? I didn't know. But it haunted me. I started journaling again, trying to sort through the mess. The pages filled quickly, mostly with his name, with questions I couldn't answer. Why him? Why me? Was it ever real? But no matter how much I wrote, nothing gave me peace. I still wanted him. I still missed him. I saw him again a week later, by accident, or maybe fate's cruel sense of humor. He was sitting at a bar with another man, laughing, leaning in close, his hand resting on the guy's thigh. My breath caught in my throat. I felt frozen, like someone had pressed pause on the world. I didn't know what to do. I stood there too long, staring. And then, as if he felt me, Arden turned his head and looked straight at me. No shock. No guilt. Just a slow, amused smile, like he knew exactly what kind of chaos he was causing in me. Then he looked away. Just like that. Like I didn't exist. I stumbled out of the bar before I could break down. But it didn't matter. I cried anyway. In my car, on the drive home, into the empty night that felt heavier than it ever had before. That night I didn't even make it to my bed. I collapsed on the floor, wrapped in a blanket that couldn't warm me. I felt hollow. Not broken, emptied. Like someone had scooped out everything I once was and left nothing in its place. I thought about calling someone. A friend. My sister. My old therapist. But the idea of explaining all this felt exhausting. Who would understand that I gave myself to someone who didn't want me? And now I didn't know how to exist without him. Who would understand that this wasn't about sex, or even love? It was about identity. About being seen, felt, known, even for just a moment. I lay there until morning, eyes dry, heart pounding like it was trying to remind me I was still alive. But it didn't feel like living. It felt like waiting. Waiting for a message. A call. A knock on the door. Anything that would tell me I hadn't imagined the whole thing. That I mattered. That I was still tethered to something real. But nothing came. And for the first time, I started to wonder if this pain would ever leave, or if it had simply become part of me now. A second skin. A scar I'd never stop picking at. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the fact that I couldn't go another day walking around with his ghost in my head. I just knew I couldn't stay like that anymore, waiting, breaking, aching. So I got in my car. I didn't text. I didn't call. I just drove. The whole way there, my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I kept thinking, what if he doesn't answer? What if he laughs? What if I finally say everything and it changes absolutely nothing? But I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I had to see him. I had to know. When I knocked, the door opened slower than I expected. He was barefoot, holding a glass of red wine like I hadn't just shown up unannounced after weeks of silence. He looked at me for a moment, long and unreadable, then stepped aside. I walked in without a word. The apartment looked the same, calm, clean, expensive. Everything in its place. Except me. I was a mess. My hair, my clothes, my breath. I didn't sit. I just stood there and let it out. I told him everything. I didn't hold back. I told him how I hadn't been able to eat, how I couldn't sleep without dreaming of him, how I hated myself for wanting him even when I knew he didn't care. I told him how he'd taken something from me I couldn't get back, something deeper than innocence. I told him how I'd become someone I didn't recognize, someone who begged for crumbs and mistook them for love. My voice broke more than once, but I didn't stop. I needed him to hear it. I needed him to understand what he'd done to me. What I let him do. He listened. That was the most painful part. He didn't interrupt. Didn't defend himself. He just stood there, sipping his wine like he was watching a monologue in a play he'd already seen before. When I finally stopped talking, when the room fell quiet again and I felt like my lungs might collapse, he set his glass down on the table and walked toward me. I braced myself for something, an apology, a cruel remark, a lie to soften the truth. But what he said cut sharper than anything I'd prepared for. "You made me into your god." I never asked for that. It knocked the wind out of me. I stared at him, stunned. His voice didn't rise. He didn't look angry. Just honest. Brutally, terrifyingly honest. "You needed something," he said, "and I happened to be there when the dam cracked. But I didn't build your emptiness, Daniel. I just walked through it." I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to tell him he was wrong. That he did this to me. That he pushed and pulled and played with me like I was a toy he got bored of. But the truth was, part of me knew he wasn't lying. I gave him power he never asked for. I gave him worship. And in return, he gave me something I hadn't known how to handle: attention, touch, intensity. It was me who turned it into love. Me who turned it into pain. He stepped closer, looked me straight in the eyes. "You were a man before me. Be one after." Then he turned away, just like that, and walked back to his wine. The conversation was over. Or maybe it never really started. I left without another word. I didn't cry this time. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I just walked out of his place and into the cool night air, and I breathed. For the first time in weeks, I really breathed. Deep, steady, painful breaths. The kind that remind you you're still here, even when you don't know why. I drove home in silence. No music. No thoughts. Just a numb kind of stillness. That night, I deleted his number. Blocked him on every app. I sat on my bed and stared at the empty screen like it was a grave. Part of me wanted to message him one last time, just to say goodbye. But I didn't. I knew he wouldn't respond. Or worse, he would, and I'd spiral all over again. I lay down, pulled the blanket over my chest, and closed my eyes. I expected the dreams to come. The flashbacks. The ache. But instead I just slept. No visions. No noise. Just darkness. And for once, that darkness felt like peace. Time didn't heal everything, but it did soften the noise. At first, it was just the absence of him that echoed. I'd wake up expecting to check my phone, to see his name, to feel that rush of adrenaline I used to mistake for love. But nothing came. And little by little, the silence stopped hurting. It became normal. I went back to therapy, quietly, without telling anyone. I didn't even know what to say at first. I sat on the couch and looked at the ceiling while my therapist waited. Eventually, I told her I'd lost something, but I wasn't sure what it was. She asked if I missed him. I said no. I missed who I was when I thought he saw me. That version of me, the one that felt worth touching, worth noticing, that's who I grieved. I started showing up for myself again in small ways. I cleaned the apartment. I answered my sister's calls. I even met up with some friends who I hadn't seen in weeks. They didn't ask questions, just welcomed me back like I'd been on a long trip. and in some ways I had. I had gone somewhere dark, far from myself, and I was only now starting to find the path back. I picked up drawing again. Nothing big, just sketching shapes, figures, messy lines that turned into something honest. I hiked. I cooked real meals. I started to feel my body again, not as something to give away, but something to care for. I wasn't healed. But I wasn't bleeding anymore either. Then I met Jamie. It wasn't fireworks or chaos. It was coffee. A bookstore. Two people reaching for the same dogged poetry collection. We laughed, shared a few awkward sentences, and then went our separate ways. I didn't think much of it. But a week later, I saw him again, same spot, this time with a shy smile and a question. "Do you want to get coffee?" I said yes before I could overthink it. Our first conversation was clumsy but kind. He asked questions and waited for the answers. He didn't push. He didn't probe. He didn't try to fix anything. Just sat across from me, interested, without needing anything in return. That I kept my guard up. Not in a dramatic way, just careful. I didn't talk about Arden. I didn't talk about what happened or what I'd been through. Jamie didn't ask. He just listened when I did talk. He made me laugh with dumb jokes and odd facts about space. He told me about his rescue dog who hates thunderstorms and his terrible habit of singing in the shower. Everything about him felt soft. Not weak, gentle. Like he'd learned not to take up more space than he needed, and I appreciated that. There were no games. No tension. Just slow, quiet understanding. The first time he touched my hand, it was so subtle I almost missed it. We were sitting on a bench, talking about nothing, and suddenly his fingers were brushing mine. My heart stuttered. Not because it was electric or wild, but because it wasn't. It was calm. Grounded. I didn't pull away. I looked at him, and he looked back, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Safety. Not the safety of walls or silence, but the safety of being seen and not being consumed. We kissed a week later. It wasn't like before. It wasn't fast or hungry. It was slow and unsure, a question asked and gently answered. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was disappearing into someone. I felt like I was arriving. There was no rush to undress or claim or conquer. There was just warmth. I didn't tell Jamie he was my first kiss that didn't come from a storm. I didn't tell him about the man before him, the fire I walked through to get here. I didn't need to. He never asked me to be perfect or whole. He just asked me to be there. Later that night, alone in bed, I opened my journal for the first time in weeks. I didn't write his name. I didn't write about longing or pain or shadows. I wrote one sentence, over and over, until the page was full. I used to crave pain. Now I crave truth. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I smiled. Not a fake one. Not one to convince myself I was okay. A real one. Soft. Tired. But real. I didn't know where things with Jamie would go. I didn't know if I was ready for love again. But I knew this, whatever came next, I would meet it as myself. Not broken. Not begging. Whole enough to choose peace over chaos. And that felt like the beginning of something honest. I think about him sometimes. Not often, not with longing, but like you'd remember a dream that once shook you awake. There are days when his name crosses my mind like a shadow at the edge of light. Arden. The man who opened me, broke me, and left me crawling through the wreckage of my own hunger. But I don't flinch anymore when I think of him. I don't feel the need to blame or hate, or justify what happened between us. I don't need to rewrite the past to make it easier to live with. I lived through it. That's enough. I was a virgin until I was 30. Not just in the way people mean it, not just skin or touch or bodies tangled in bedsheets. I was untouched in every way that matters. I had never truly given myself to anyone. Never truly seen myself as someone worthy of being wanted, not because of how I looked or how I spoke, but just because I existed. I spent years behind glass, watching other people live, waiting for someone to choose me so I could finally start choosing myself. And when he came along, I mistook his interest for love, his intensity for care, his attention for salvation. But it wasn't any of those things. It was a collision. A spark that set fire to everything I had carefully built to survive. And maybe I needed that, because when it all fell apart, when I had nothing left of what I thought I was, I had no choice but to start again. Slowly. Quietly. In the smallest ways. With breath. With sleep. With food. With friends. With long walks and even longer silences. I built myself from the inside out, not for anyone else, but for me. And in that stillness, something shifted. I began to see myself not as a body waiting to be chosen, but as a person already whole. Someone who had worth, even without another person's validation. Someone who didn't need to be shattered to feel alive. Jamie is still here. We're not perfect. We fight sometimes. We misunderstand each other. We've had nights where we've gone to bed without speaking and mornings where the air between us felt heavy. But every time, we come back. Not because we need each other to survive, but because we want to grow in the same direction. He doesn't make me forget what happened. He doesn't ask me to pretend I'm untouched. He holds the parts of me that still tremble, and he doesn't flinch. That's what love is, I think. Not the fire that burns everything down, but the hands that help rebuild what's left out. If you're listening to this, and you're still waiting, still untouched, still hiding, still scared, please hear me when I say this. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not a mistake waiting to be fixed. Don't give yourself away just to feel wanted. Don't let someone else decide what you're worth. The right touch won't leave you hollow. The right love won't make you question your sanity. And the right moment? It won't feel like an explosion. It'll feel like coming home. I used to think Arden ruined me. But now I know, he revealed me. He exposed the softest parts of me, the ones I'd kept hidden even from myself. And through the pain, I found a version of me that was finally ready to live. So maybe he didn't break me. Maybe I needed to fall apart to become real. If this story made you feel seen, or if it reminded you of your own journey, I hope you hold on to this. Your story isn't over. Whatever page you're on, keep writing. Keep walking. Keep breathing. You are not alone in this. And there is more love waiting for you. Love that doesn't hurt. Love that doesn't demand a piece of your soul just to feel close. Thank you for listening. If this story touched something inside you, share it. Let someone else know they're not alone either. And if you want to hear more stories like this, raw, messy, honest, stick around. Because healing doesn't happen in silence. It happens in truth. And this is just the beginning. If this story made your heart ache, breathe heavy, or reminded you of your own past, you're not alone. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe for more raw and emotional LGBTQ+ stories that speak the truth no one dares to say out loud. Your journey matters. And your voice? It deserves to be heard.